we all have a brand. I'll use that word for you. I would say we all have a personal philosophy that is guiding our thoughts, words, and actions. And in every organization we're part of, whether it's a family or a business, we are part of a culture. And either you are contributing to the culture that you would feel energized by, generatively so, or you're allowing the culture to be what it is. I'm Dr. Michael Gervais, high performance psychologist, and you're on Behind the Brand with Brian Elliott.
Everyone, welcome to another episode of the show. Michael, Dr. Michael. I usually ask my guests, how did you get this job?
Yeah, I'll tell you a funny story, is that I was walking into a fitness facility, and the gentleman behind the desk comes up to me and he says, "Hey, are you Michael Gervais?" And I said, "I am." And he says, "Hey, I don't want to bother you. You know, I'm just a huge fan of what you're doing. And but maybe at some point I can ask you a couple questions." I said, "Sure, no problem." And so the next time I came in, he said, "Hey, I know you're a little early. Do you have a few minutes?" I said, "Yeah, no problem, man, of course." And he said, "So how do you go about being, what you do? How'd you come to this?" I said, "Well, it was a lot of internal struggles. Got an undergrad in psychology, a master's degree in sports science, went back and got a PhD in psychology, then got a license in general psychology with a specialty in sport and performance, and then a subspecialty in consequential environments." I said, and then at that point, I still didn't really know much. I was really green. And I look up and I watch him, and his eyes are as big as you can imagine. And he goes, to run a podcast? I said, "Oh my God, no. I said, that's the fun part of And so he's like, "Oh, I meant your podcast." And so when you just asked that question, I wasn't sure what you're referring to, but there's all the classical training that you would hope. And then I've spent the last 20, 25 years in amphitheaters of high stress, exacting environments where in some cases they're incredibly consequential, and in some cases it's the luxury of big sport or the luxury of big business. And I can explain what I mean there.
Yeah, I would like to unpack all of that. Before we go there, I think I remember reading something about 2018, you did stand-up paddle, and you paddled from Catalina Island to the South Bay, somewhere in Redondo Beach or something.
Yeah, that's correct.
First of all, amazing. That is not easy to do.
Yeah.
And I assume that you did that to sort of be more relatable or go through what you were coaching your athletes to do, which is push yourself to the very edge. What did you learn about yourself during that excursion? I understand maybe you had some support boats and it wasn't just you in the open water alone, in the hot sun, but what did you go through? Talk about that a little bit.
Let me set it up for just a moment. I grew up in California surfing and looking at the island and being in awe of those original folks that would build their own canoe and boat, and then they'd come to the mainland, gather some resources, and go back to the island. And they did it through Shark Alley. They did it through the rips and the currents that would take place. And I just, as a 15, 16-year-old kid, I'd always look at the island like a lot of respect for that. I mean, building your own craft and then coming over. And this is like 1, 2, maybe 3 people that would paddle across.
Yeah. How many miles is it, do you know?
Yeah, it's about 32, 36 miles, somewhere in there, if you're not swept in the current. And so, I wanted just to have what we call a strike mission. I wanted to go over there and just do it solo. So I prepared for a solo strike mission. And then my wife was supportive, and then I told her what I was really thinking. No support, no guide, nothing. She was like, "Yeah, you've lost your mind," and so it is much safer to have a trail boat. And that trail boat is in case you need to get out of the water for any reason. So it's not dangerous in that respect, whether it's sharks or some sort of thing that happens. And so I'm about mile 26, and it's going pretty well. And I want to, thank all of my people right now that supported me, because I'm not built for endurance. I'm fast twitch. I'm more acute to hucking myself off the edge of a cliff, or dropping into a big wave, and the adrenaline that comes from that, then this endurance thing. So the reason I set out was to understand how the early people did it. The second was to test myself in a different way. The third was to raise some money for the ocean. We raised about $75K, which was cool, to scrape plastics off the ocean. And then I'm about 26 miles in, and the ocean opened up. I was on a treadmill out in the middle of the ocean, really tired at this point. And when I say the treadmill, I was paddling 4.2 miles an hour, and the current was going directly against me at 4.1 miles an hour.
It's no joke.
No, so I was standing still for 45 minutes at the end of a quote unquote marathon.
Yeah.
And it was just mind bending for me. It was like really mind bending. About halfway through that last 45 minutes, I'm on about hour 6 of the event at this point, paddling at about 90% effort for six hours in the open ocean. And I did the unthinkable. I went to my knees. Now I'm moving 4.2 or 1 miles an hour in the opposite direction. And the unthinkable, because that I gave up. Now, what ended up happening is that I'm fighting and I'm chipping and I'm like, okay, it's going to break. I'm going to get out of it. And I'm using all of my psychology up against this thing. I started hallucinating. I was seeing spots. I was disoriented. I looked down and I had 2 surfboards under my feet. Of course, I only had one. So it was a mild hallucination. It wasn't radical, but I was losing my way and I was tired, and I did the thing. I'm like, excuse the language here, but I was like, oh, fuck this.
Yeah, let it rip.
What am I doing?
Yeah.
And so
I'm surprised it took you from mile 26 to get there.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I know. Right.
I would have been there like mile 2.
I was in a pretty good jam. Like I was like, oh, I get the rush, if you will, of the ultra event stuff.
Yeah.
And the trail boat, that captain I had met 36 hours before. So I didn't know him, but he had shepherded plenty of people across. And so he understands the ocean. He's a waterman as well. And he did something remarkable in that moment. Dropped to my knees, and he knows exactly what was happening. I'm ripping 4.2 miles in the opposite direction. My hands are on the board and I'm on my knees. And he yelled from, I don't know, 5 football fields away out in the ocean. And he just yelled one thing: stand up. That's it. He didn't say anything else. And it shot right through me. I'm like, yeah, I can stand up. So the simplicity of that message with the intensity and the knowing exactly that I couldn't process anything. I stood up. And then as I stood up, he clapped like a wild person. And I was like, yes. Okay. And then he said one more thing: one paddle. And he screamed it from 4 or 5 football fields away: one paddle. And so I just put my oar in the water and I did one paddle, and he clapped like a wild person. And I thought, I can do one more. I can do one more. I can do one more. And then before you know it, I'm crying. And this is to answer your question, so tears are flooding through me. And I knew in that moment that I wrestled my whole life with abandonment, but I didn't know it. My parents are loving and kind. They're good humans. The planet is better because of them. But their mission as a couple and their internal pain as humans, their traumas that they were working through when I was a young kid, was more important than me. Now, if they were here in this room, they'd say, honey, we're so sad to hear this is your experience. We were always there for you.
Yeah.
Which is the double entendre kind of mind bender for me, because I can pull those messages through that they were there. They're great in so many ways, but there was a loneliness that I experienced as a little kid. And abandonment is too big of a word, but not being seen, not being really understood. And they tried, and maybe it was me that was difficult. I was just a kid. But let me explain. Dad is a recovering alcoholic, drug addict, workaholic. Mom is codependent, loving, kind, supportive. So I never got to the truth. Dad was doing his thing, kind of absent even when he was present. Good man, right? And mom was always making it nice. I don't know if you can relate. I would bet there's people that can. And what I did in that moment, it's like all this calcium knocked off me. And the calcium knocked off, and I felt like a sense of, here I am. And I've been battling this thing to want to be seen, to want to be understood. And I was obsessively and tirelessly working to the extreme level to be great at my craft. And that is of sport and performance psychology in an unhealthy way. And I only wanted to work with people that were as obsessed to be their best. And it all just kind of shut off me. And I was like, oh my, this is a moment for me. And that captain, he left me alone for the rest of I ended up breaking out of the rip. And it was another hour and a half paddle to get to the shore. And I want to tie one more thing around. And I'm sharing the details of the story because I think that as a true line, many of us desperately want to be seen. And we obsessively have this work ethic and anxiousness to do something special so that we can be something special. This do more to be more, the do the extraordinary to be extraordinary, the hustle hard, anxiety provoking message that's there is the outspringing of this idea that if you can go the distance, you'll be celebrated. And it's not the right narrative. And I'll come back to a through line in a minute. When I first started surfing, I was a little kid, and there's two types of surfing. There's what's called hardcore or free surfing. Yeah. And then there is competitive surfing.
You're talking to a California native, bro.
So you know exactly what I'm going to say here. Yeah. Yes.
I hung out at Newport, 42nd Street, hung out, near the Wedge.
It's a great break.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great break. And so that core surfing, as you'd recognize, is really about do the thing, put yourself in a heavy situation, don't talk about it, don't even ask anybody if they saw it, because that's a corruption to the experience. But be about it, know about it, experience it completely, because you're the one that knows whether you hesitated, whether you went for it, whatever, all of those details.
Yeah.
And in competitive surfing, it was people on the beach judging and critiquing and giving scores and force ranking and all the things that you would imagine from competition. I could do it in free surfing, but I couldn't translate my skills to competitive surfing. Mm-hmm. I was overwhelmed by people judging me,
right,
by critiquing me. And so I was 15 years old, and this gentleman paddles by me in a competition. He goes, "Gervais, I see you surfing out here all the time. You got to stop worrying about all the things that could go wrong." And I thought, how does he know? How does he know that I can barely feel my surfboard? I'm completely anxious in my head. Like I feel like a fraction of myself, like a shell of myself. I thought, how does he know? And then he paddled away like a good competitor. He dropped a bomb on me. He meant to do good, I think. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, if that's what I'm doing, it's not working. What if I just flip that around and I started thinking about things I would like to have happen? Simple little 15-year-old naive, flip the script type of thing. And I started doing that, and I came back to feeling like, oh wait, I'm actually here. I wasn't anxiously worrying about later. So now back to the
insightful for a 15-year-old. I mean, some foreshadowing maybe of the future.
Yeah, well, yeah, I think maybe. That was a moment for me that was really important. Okay, and the foreshadowing would be that it's that moment set me down a path to go, what is this thing called the mind? What just happened? Mm-hmm. And I wish I could tell you the story that I went on and was a professional surfer from that point forward, which was my dream. But I didn't have it all together. I didn't have anything close. So back to the ultra event. I'm about, 200 yards, 2 football fields away from the shore, and I'm paddling in. And there's a bunch of people there waiting for me to come in. And I was completely free from worrying or thinking about what they were thinking about me. And there was a celebration that there was family and friends there, and it was like a full circle experience about not only the calcium being knocked off from I see the game I've been playing and I'm free from it in this moment. And then having the next available moment was that people were there not judging me. They were there really, and I felt safe to just paddle in, whether I fell, whether I did whatever, I'm safe to just adjust accordingly.
Yeah, let's put a timestamp on that. How old were you when that happened?
The
The stand-up paddle.
Ultra. Oh, that 2018. So I'm 52 now. That was like 40s. Was that 47, 46? My math is a little screwed up. Maybe 45.
So I'll just point out to the audience, anyone who's thinking that, you're feeling some shame maybe about, I should be over this by now. I'm this age. I just think that's a reminder that that doesn't matter, right? That you can come to these conclusions at 15, or you can have, several of these aha moments throughout your life, whatever age, right?
And I'll add one more.
Yeah, please.
Is that I spent my entire adult life working on psychology. So I was completely attuned to how we work from the inside out, how our thoughts work, how our emotions work, how micro traumas or full traumas get in the way of our hopes and dreams. And I not only was working with some of the most skilled, but I also was applying those same principles for myself. And it still took a moment. It still took this edge pushing experience for me to break free. And I called my mentor afterwards, and I told him the experience, and he said, I've told you your whole life, because I've known him since I was 15. I've told you your whole life that you are hard fucking headed. Mm-hmm. So, like that can help us out. It can also hold us back.
Yeah. Very relatable what you're saying. I have so many thoughts racing through my mind, just personal experiences. Thank you for sharing that story. I was getting goosebumps while you're telling it. I love it. A lot of people who watch and listen to this show, they're entrepreneurs. They are in startup mode. They have small businesses. They're building their brands. And a lot of people come to this show to learn how to not only build their brand, but how to become better at what they do, perform high performance, to better themselves. It could be emotionally or skill wise. And they come here because the best of the best comes on here, and they impart all this wisdom. Let's talk about the Michael Gervais brand for just a minute, and frame this, so I'm curious how you frame things. What would you say the Michael Gervais brand is?
I've struggled with this a lot.
Yeah.
And I was looking forward to having this conversation with you
good.
for other reasons. So for me, for a long time, a brand felt like a veneer. Yeah. And I didn't really understand the fullness of what that can mean. Mm-hmm. And so I pushed it off a bunch. So coming full circle, just recently I've been reinvigorating that conversation, or inviting that conversation, like what is the brand? Because the essence of me is I'm just a human trying to figure this thing out.
Yeah.
Right. Like I don't have the grand understanding of how the thing works. I'm not an enlightened one. I know I'm not a sociopath. I know I'm not a narcissist. Mm-hmm. So I'm a dude with some traumas that some people would say that's not trauma. You live the privileged life. But we all have. No one gets through this world without trauma. Yeah. And so I couch it with like, if you were to ask the brand question and I was studied on it and I could give you a 2-liner, that would be awesome. I don't have it. The way that I think about brand right now is that I am authentically exploring the edges of my potential and wanting to help other people do the same. Yeah. So that the brand is like, that person or that company finding mastery, they are fundamentally committed to helping others unlock the untapped potential that lies dormant in most of us. And how do we go about doing it? Help people train their minds to unlock that potential that sits inside.
And I want to add some more context. The reason I ask that, because, when I first asked my mentor, Seth Godin, he immediately pushed back. And I know you recently interviewed Seth.
He was so fun. Yeah. So when you're saying that, I'm like, what a fun mentor he must have been. Like, he's a truth teller. He's a fire breather.
Yeah. And we can exchange stories on this. But when I first asked him that question, he pushed back immediately. He says, "I'm not a brand. I'm a human being."
So I'm in good company there. Yeah, right.
But I'm going to push back on Seth's philosophy. While I agree that we are humans, most of us, that you also have a brand, and then that sort of dovetails, in my opinion, and there's maybe some gray area to this idea of finding your purpose. And because I think if you don't define your brand, or substitute your brand with your purpose, then you're sort of being blown with the winds, and you're this, rudderless ship that just goes with, either popular opinion or worrying too much about what other people think of you, which is another topic I want to dive into. But that having a distinct brand, or at least a purpose, knowing who you are, what you stand for, what you're trying to accomplish, is vitally important to your entire life, right? And so I don't want to commercialize it. I want people to understand that, if you have a personal brand, whether you like it or not, that people are going to assign that on you. And so you might as well decide it for yourself. And then after you decide, then it ultimately lives in the hearts and the minds of other people. You sort of have to give up the control to a certain degree once you start walking the talk. And hopefully, if what you're saying is aligned with your actions, then that will continue to translate. If it doesn't, that's where you run into problems, and people say, you're a hypocrite, or that doesn't track, or...
Yeah, that's where, so the word, I'm glad you opened that up, because my purpose is, I've done a lot of work to be clear about my purpose. I'm happy to share that. And then brand has always felt contrived. Like, these are the words that represent the brand. And that's like the veneer piece I was talking about. And I don't care about that. What I care about is authentically living in alignment to first principles.
Yeah.
So what are my first principles? I can get into that as well. And that's up to, if I'm aligned to my first principles and I'm lining up my thoughts, words, and actions in ways that are in harmony with first principles that matter to me, the way that comes off to another person, that's their experience. My experience, my work, is to know my purpose, have my first principles dialed in, and have the mental skills to be able to navigate high heat, high pressured environments and have conviction for those first principles when it's hard to have conviction. That is what elite athletes do. Mm-hmm. That is what all the intrepid pioneers of human potential and otherwise they do. They know what they stand for. They have the mental skills to be able to back it up when it's hard. And those are the heroes that I've learned from. And then I just studied the science, so it's not just like making stuff up. So my purpose is quite clear, which is to help people live in the present moment more often.
Yeah, I love that. Another way to look at brand is it becomes a shorthand for what you can expect. So I don't know Coach Bill Belichick very well, but from everything that I have observed, if I were to play for Coach Belichick, I could expect from his brand some tough talk. If I'm not running the play right, then I'm going to run the bleachers. Or I could expect to get chewed out. I'm not going to get a lot of smiles from Coach Belichick. I'm going to play in bad weather. Rain or shine, I'm going to play my best and be expected to give my best. These types of things. Coach Carroll. If I played for Coach Carroll, I would expect a lot of enthusiasm, music playing at practice that's like uplifting. I'm optimistic. Gets me into the groove. Constantly being told what I did well, and maybe some constructive criticism. That's what I observe about Coach Carroll's brand. Maybe you can weigh in on this. So a brand is a shorthand, what we come to expect. And so I think, that's super important to think about as we're, going about our lives and building our businesses and doing our things.
Yeah. I had the fortune to work, as you know, up close with Coach Carroll and the Seattle Seahawks for 9 seasons.
Tell me some stories.
Oh, there's so many. I mean, but to answer your point about brand, and there's so many fun stories I would love to relish in those with you, is that we were very clear. This is his work that he did, his alone work, that he did early on in his career. And he called it his style. So the style of the team that he's coaching. Mm-hmm. And there was 4 words. You might call this brand. But the idea was if somebody were to walk by practice and one of his friends or one of my friends were to walk by practice, what would we want them to see? And he's like, look, we're having a lot of fun. Yep. So great enthusiasm.
Great environment.
Is the word. No, the word is great enthusiasm. Okay. Then great effort. Working really hard, like right at the edges. Mm-hmm. It's great effort. Great toughness. I don't know what you guys are doing over there, but you guys look really tough. You work really hard and you're having fun. And then the last variable is playing smart. So making intelligent choices along the way. So that was the style of play as he coined it. And I think that that is probably what you're calling the brand. So if there's a signature style or signature brand of a Coach Carroll team, it would be those four. And the way to make that super simple to understand is say, look, we're always competing. And that is the guiding philosophy or a first principle for him. Always compete to be your very best. And when you do that, you can help others be their very best. That's really what we're trying to do.
So you were, what was your role? Were you the performance coach? Were you the team psychologist? What was your role?
My partnership to get down in the weeds was really Coach Carroll and John Schneider, the general manager. Those are the two that I reported to. It was mainly Coach Carroll. And the charter was to help increase the psychology and psychological skills across the organization. So it wasn't to be a sports psychologist with the athletes,
right,
or to be a sports psychologist for Coach Carroll. It was systemically to figure out solutions for everybody in the building to have best practices on how to invest in their psychology so that we can be our very best together. There's only three things that you can train. You can train your craft, you can train your body, and you can train your mind. And the best of the best don't leave one of those up to chance. And so it begs the question, like, why should we? And psychology has this weird wrap around it. But when you pull the curtain back in elite performing environments, they are very dedicated to mastery of craft, mastery of body, and mastery of self. And mastery of self is really about being great with your psychology.
Yeah, and that reminds me of something was really the main takeaway when after I talked to Russ Wilson, we were talking off camera.
Yeah.
And Russell said to me, hey, you have a personal trainer at the gym. Why don't you have someone for emotional fitness? And that was like, oh, well, yeah, of course. I've been an athlete my whole life, and I wish I had some of that. People were teaching me my craft, and the physical part was there, but the emotional part, the mental part.
That's right.
I just had to navigate on my own.
That's right.
And
I mean, seriously, like you and I are probably about the same age. What were our parents doing? The boomers. What were the boomers doing?
Yeah.
Because they didn't know. They somehow knew the value of psychology, but it took us to be in the now generation to wave their arms and say, wait, hold on. Like, I want to be great. And my mind is really important in that. What are best practices?
Yeah. Well, in answer to your question, what they were doing, I think they were mainly passing on things that they learned from their parents.
The silent generation.
So there's just like this whole sort of like pass it, play it forward, pay it forward. Let's do what kind of we think worked in the past. I think of this idea of throwing the kid in the deep end when he can't swim and having the kid figure it out. Now, there is some merit to that, figuring things out on your own and, being individual. There's a lot of downsides too, right?
Yeah.
I think that sums up how my parents tried to deal with things.
Yeah. I mean, one of our first principles at Finding Mastery is that no one does it alone. Even individual contributors like a professional golfer or tennis player or surfer, right? Or fighter. Yes, they are by themselves in the cage. But there's a team inside of a team that supports them.
Yeah.
And so nobody does it alone. And that idea that we are more social beings than we even imagine. We're more like a coral reef of an ecosystem than we are like individuals striking gold on our own. That's an old idea, and it doesn't really hold up to nature, and it doesn't really hold up to how the best in the world operate. Now, that doesn't mean that unlocks don't happen sometimes by yourself, but nobody does the extraordinary alone.
Yeah, so let's go back to Coach Carroll for a minute. I find it interesting, and I don't know if it was deliberately done this way or not, but it seems like you were aimed at the top, and from the top, then Coach Carroll could then do his good with the team. Instead of like aiming at, the quarterback or the DBs or the corners, or the tackles, or, it's like, nope, you went right to Coach Carroll. I feel like you probably armed him with tools to be able to manage and lead, and I'd like to break that down too. Talk about the kind of skills that you were teaching him with the principles of psychology that were helping him be a coach at the highest level.
I'm glad you bring that up, because early in my career, I'll share a radical mistake I made as a hope that others won't make that same mistake. So early in my career, I got brought into a professional team, and the coach says to me, "Hey, I've got someone I want you to work with." And I thought, great. Okay, I've got a job. I'm needed. Like,
Right.
okay, great. I want to prove that, and it happened to be the best player on the team. And that best player was choking. So there was a quote unquote problem athlete. And I put quotes up because I want to make that point clear.
Mm-hmm. He was stuck.
He was stuck.
Okay.
He was struggling.
They brought you in to get him unstuck.
Yeah, well, they brought me in to work with a team, and that was going to be the first athlete that I worked with.
Your project.
Yeah. And so I was like, great. Now, I didn't realize, because I wasn't sophisticated enough, that when everyone in the building saw me walking with that athlete, the narrative was, oh, when you talk to Gervais, it's like you're struggling.
Right.
I didn't realize
Negative
it.
stigma.
Yeah. So instantly.
Yeah.
So there wasn't air cover. There wasn't a message. There wasn't from the top through the organization a way to normalize the investment in the study of your mind.
Right. This is what we do. We're a team.
That's
This
right.
is how we approach things.
Every day we're going to train our craft, train our body, and train our mind.
Yeah. By the way, you're special.
That's right.
And we're looking out for you in your best interest and the team's interest.
That's right.
By bringing this person on. Yeah.
And when you're talking to Gervais, like, we all know that you're getting a competitive advantage.
Yeah.
So, like, let's see where we can take it.
Yeah.
So it wasn't that. So this athlete ended up performing really well. He got through his thing. That's not the insight. That's cool. But then his performance fell back to the struggle level. And I thought, what is happening? So there's this nice lift. Everyone's like, right, this is great. There's this nice lift. And then fell back to the norm. And the reason being is because we didn't impact the culture.
Gotcha.
So
Okay.
we helped the one, but not the all.
Right.
So culture, there's lots of definitions for culture, but the way I define culture is that culture is the artifact of the relationships that we have. It's the way that we treat each other. It's the way that we take care of each other. It's the way we challenge and support each other.
Yeah.
And so that's what the culture essentially rests on, the relationships.
Yeah. And a lot of times the culture can come from the top, whether it's the ownership, the general manager, the coach. A lot of that flows from the top.
Yeah, 100%. Now, it is embodied and imbued by the athletes. They have to bring it alive. You can't send a message and think that it's going to happen.
Right.
They have to swallow it, metabolize it, believe it, feel it, and go, yes, this is exactly the culture I want to be in. And the culture up at the Seahawks, to make it really clear, the culture was to compete to help each one of the people to be their very best, and everybody's doing that for each other. So if you were to ask one person from the locker room, like, hey, what was the culture at the Seahawks about? Hopefully they would say, man, it was about always competing. And you go, what does that mean? I don't know. We're all helping each other be our best. Like, that was it. Like, I was working my ass off to help somebody else be great.
Mm-hmm. And the interesting, that translated to the fans too. That's why you got the 12th man.
That's right.
Like, that was somehow communicated.
We wanted them and
to
needed
the fan
them.
base.
That energy, they were good for, as it's called, like, when they get really loud. It was one of the loudest stadiums on the planet.
Yeah.
And they would get so loud that the other team would jump off sides.
Right.
That's an expensive mistake in the NFL, and we didn't do anything other than, like, have this 78,000 humans that were screaming at the top of their lungs saying, we're in it with you. And it was pretty awesome.
Well, I would say that's another powerful byproduct of culture.
That's it.
Right. It permeated into the hearts and minds of the fan base. They got it.
Coach grabbed me one day. We're in the office, and he grabbed me. He goes, hey, I want you to listen to this interview. And it was of like a really solid performer on our team. And he was getting interviewed after the game. And I looked up at him, and he goes, yup. So that athlete was using what we would hope would be the most beautiful language to describe the challenge, to describe, like, the competitors, to describe the culture. Like, they were using the language that we would hope somebody would use. And it wasn't like they were hey, let me get my cheat sheet and say the words that somebody else hopes I say. It was coming from within.
Right. They'd internalized it.
And so we're like, oh my, like that's a signal that it was an accidental signal. The other thing that happened is that media started using the same language. And so in interviews, media would say, hey, Russ, tell me about the culture. Hey, Russ, tell me about how you're letting go of your mistakes. Hey, Russ, tell me about like what it means to always compete. Like, so they were using the language, which was like this another ripple effect. And so when you get your culture right, it's remarkable. And to your earlier point about brand, we all have a brand. I'll use that word for you. I would say we all have a personal philosophy that is guiding our thoughts, words, and actions. And in every organization we're part of, whether it's a family or a business, we are part of a culture. And either you are contributing to the culture that you would feel energized by, generatively so, or you're allowing the culture to be what it is. So in coaching, we say you're either coaching a behavior or tolerating it.
Right.
Right?
That resonates with me, yeah.
Either way, you're responsible for like those things that you're trying. If the athlete is like rolling their eyes after a mistake, well, either you're coaching that or you're tolerating it. So we are more powerful than we think. We have way more internal power when we do the internal work. Now, the real challenge is that most of us, me for most of my life, didn't know how to invest in my internal sense of self and my internal skills. So the external world pushed me around. And the external world would influence my internal experience. It doesn't need to be that way. And that's a completely different orientation for how the most powerful humans work. They work from the inside out, and they go out into the world, hopefully benevolently, to create or be part of a compelling future that matters to them.
So it's a good transition point to talk about FOPO, this acronym that you have invented, coined. Explain what fear of other people's opinion really is, where it comes from, and how we can overcome it.
It was, so we all know what FOMO is. And so flippantly, I thought like, what is another great fear? And
Snakes. Spiders.
Snakes and spiders. Yeah. Public speaking.
Tiger sharks.
Yeah. So I went to public speaking, actually. It was what came up. And why is public speaking one of the most dangerous, scariest, most overwhelming things for modern humans? It's because the danger in that room are the opinions of other people.
Right.
So just for fun, I wrote this article in Harvard Business Review. It was a 3-pager. And 12 months later, the publisher called and they said, hey, you really hit a nerve. This idea about fear of people's opinions and what to do about it, it was the number one downloaded article over the last 12 months. And so you really touched a nerve here. What do you think? We read a book. I thought, I don't have any more. Like, it was just this flippant idea,
Yeah.
And so I scrubbed the research and theory to better understand what's really happening. Come to understand our brain is an ancient brain. It hasn't changed a whole lot. So we go back 200,000 years ago. If you and I were responsible for something in the tribe, and let's say we're gathering or we're hunting, and we came back empty-handed, the first time, what do you think the elders say? They give us a little bit of a slash. They're like,
Yeah.
hey, what happened?
Yeah. Shoulder shrug.
Right. Like, and we're like, I don't know.
What's the deal?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, no, they shoulder shrug. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we're like, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, maybe it's more like that. And then if that happens a second time or a third time, what happens there?
Well, I guess you're probably in danger of being, either not eating that night or being escorted out of the tribe.
At some point, they're like, you're relegated.
You've got to live over there.
Yeah, we can't count on you.
Right.
Matter of fact, there's some other people that are really hungry, and we're all looking at you. You're earning your way out now. So performance mattered 200,000 years ago.
Right.
And if you underperformed, there was a chance that you could be rejected. Now, relegated is one thing, rejected is another. If you and I, maybe we had a couple family members, but it was like 6 of us, and we're completely relegated and rejected out of the tribe, the wild was too wild. We're not surviving that. And so it was a near-death sentence.
Right.
fast forward 200,000 years ago, that same circuitry in the brain is still alive. We haven't undone that. So if I look at you sideways publicly, or I do something that's kind of embarrassing, or I undress you, or what, you're going to have a response. And even more subtly, all of us are playing this game for safety.
Mm-hmm.
Belonging is safety. The sheep that's at the center of the group is much safer from the wolves that are on the outside. And so belonging is safety. And we're playing this second game uninformed to try to fit in, to belong, to not be rejected, to be accepted. It comes at a cost, though.
Mm-hmm.
And FOPO is the on-ramp. There's a bunch of on-ramps to FOPO, but FOPO, the costs are incredible. And so that's really what we went through. Like, what are ways to work with FOPO? And one of the ways is just to put a name to it. It's like, I don't know. And I'll ask you, Brian, like, do you struggle with it in any way?
So when I first heard about it, and I started taking inventory, I thought, oh, I don't care what other people say. Mm-hmm. Right? That was my first reaction. Yeah. And then again, taking careful inventory, I thought, nope, that's totally wrong. Because I have pleaser tendencies.
Oh, well, that's definitely masquerading.
Right?
Yeah. Oh, totally. Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
On the surface, I'm thinking,
I'm good.
Well, I have a certain status, or I have a certain, we call it thick skin sometimes, right? Mm-hmm. And that comes from my early days, fighting for my position at the beach, maybe, who knows, right? I played team sports. When you think, someone throws an insult at you, now it just ricochets off. So no, I don't care what people say, but no, taking careful inventory, I definitely care to a high degree. And in certain circles and certain associations that I've got, it matters more, and sometimes it matters less.
Yeah.
But I definitely, and that's why I wanted to talk to you, because we can have a little therapy session here about how I can overcome it. But yeah, no, and
it would be weird if you didn't, right? Like, that's a narcissist, that's a sociopath, and
right.
So.
Well, I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah. No. Right. Yeah. And the other piece that just to call out is this is not a calling. This is not a calling to not care. This is a calling to stop worrying.
Right.
So worrying and caring are very, very different. The orientation is very different.
Yes. I'm glad that you have the distinction. I have a little personal story for you.
Yeah.
So I have 4 kids. And my youngest son...
So you play zone defense?
We also play one-on-one, though.
Oh, my goodness.
We have to. Because this is something we talk about in our family all the time, which is when the kids say, well, that's not fair. We say, right. Because this is like custom made just for you. So like what was done for your brother or sister is not being done for you. It's not a one-size-fits-all parenting approach. This is customized for you. This is what you need. Your brother didn't need that. Your sister didn't need that.
That's John Wooden's approach to treat each person independently different. No, I'm sorry. To treat each person equally different.
I love that.
Right? Yeah. It's very cool.
And so yes, sometimes we are playing zone, and sometimes we're playing man on man. And so this is a couple of years ago. I got upset with him for something, or, not upset, but like I kind of scolded him, like, it was probably clean your room, because this room's always messy. And I was sort of withholding my approval, and maybe even like, fatherly affection. Like, I was sort of giving him the silent treatment, like, clean your room, and we're not speaking until you get this done. And
by the way, is one of the most radical things we can do is withhold attention and affection.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty jarring.
It crushed him.
Yeah.
He was...
it's good to hear, actually.
He was 13.
It points to his health.
I'm happy to hear that, too.
Not yours.
Well, there was a learning moment for me, I'll tell you. I'm getting around to it.
Yeah.
So he's 13. That was a couple years ago. He was crushed, crying, like tears coming down his eyes. Yeah, cool. And I thought, what's the matter? What's wrong? And basically, he told me, he says, "You're my best friend. How could you, how could you do this?" And I was like, I had no idea.
You're the most important relationship he has.
Yes. And then I started getting choked up. I thought, I'm so sorry. Like, thank you for reminding me of how important my influence. And I didn't say this out loud, but I was like, I'm really grateful that I still have influence
Yeah.
with him at age 13. Because, as you know, that starts to diminish as they get friends in the teenage years. But we are still, like, there's sometimes when I say to him, listen, I have to be dad right now because I know it's not popular, and maybe this is going to be upsetting to you, but like, I need to keep you safe. And so I just need to make the decision as your dad because I have to keep you safe. And that's my job, right? That's my responsibility. It's more important that you're safe than that you are happy with my decision right now. Mm-hmm. But most of the other time, like, we're like this. Amazing. Like, he's like a little mini me. And so that was such an eye-opening experience for me, to have him feel like that relationship, that we were so close, that, belonging in that situation was so important, that it was just, I don't know, it was super important, transformative for us. And
that's really cool. Yeah. And I also, it's noted that you were able to tell that story and feel at the same time. I don't know if it translates over the microphone, but I could see your pupils changed, your skin tone changed, your voice changed. You felt the heat of that in just describing it. And that is what modern leadership is knowing how to work with emotions, not muting them out, not like, go get a drink of water later, toughen it up. That's really old. Mm-hmm. But to do what you just did is what I would consider the mark of the modern leader, is to understand how to work with emotions in high heat, high pressured, high stress environments, to be able to help people do the same for themselves so that we can point our noses toward the same mission. And when we're thrashing because we are feeling agitated and overwhelmed, it's because we haven't invested properly in the psychological skills to manage the emotional heat.
Yeah.
And look, we're all trying to figure it out. I earnestly believe that. And what's happening right now is that people are waving both arms saying, I'm not going to still do it the way that it once was. Me sacrificing my family, my loved ones, my relationships at the altar of Wall Street, or at the altar of productivity, or at the altar of like the board of directors saying that I got to make some numbers, forget it.
Yeah.
So there's got to be a better way. And that's what we're working on right now.
Yeah, I do feel like there's change in the air with the different generations, the way they think. Mm-hmm. Things are definitely changing.
There's no substitute for hard work, though. This actually is harder.
Yeah, agreed. It's a different kind of work.
That's right.
So let's stay on what we should be telling ourselves when we're having these feelings of fear of other people's opinions.
Okay. One, I'm listening to the words you're choosing, and the first word that I would address is, you said, what should I do with the emotions that I'm feeling? So if you drop the word should, what would you put in place that would maybe be an upgrade to that?
What are the options?
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
So that should, as a psychologist, we're not funny, stop shoulding on yourself.
Right.
So the idea is like, it leaves this residue that I'm not good enough, that I don't have what it needs.
Right.
Another first principle, go back to first principles, is that everything you need is already inside you. And of course you need to eat food and, but like I'm talking from a psychological wisdom place.
Sure.
And so you and I both already have experiences on how to navigate high heat, high stress, emotionally challenging moments. You've already had success there. So you already do have the answer in there. So let's investigate. What are the options? The second thing is, I think it's important that we get a bit sophisticated on the difference between feelings and emotions.
Okay.
So emotions are observable and they're public. You can see the emotions in another person when their skin changes a color, or their pupils change, or their hands rattle, or their breathing changes. Those are all emotions. They're physiological and they're observable. Feelings are private. So feelings are your interpretation of that physiological experience.
Right.
So I have to ask you about your feelings, or you have to, share them.
Right.
So I saw your physiology and I commented on your physiology. Those are the emotions. But I don't know if it was sadness for the error, if it was love for how great your relationship is. Could be some combination. I don't know.
Right.
And so then if we really want to know a person, we need to understand not only their thoughts, that's good, but their feelings, and create enough of a safe place for people to show emotions.
Right.
Okay, that's this whole narrative on psychological safety, not necessarily so people can work from emotions, but it's a very powerful part. This is what's great about athletes.
Mm-hmm.
We see them, let's stay in the NFL, we see them on Sunday. And we go, oh, they're different. They're special. They're built this way. No, they work their ass off on their craft, their body, and their mind. And what we don't see is Monday through Saturday, the level of consistent vulnerability.
That's practice.
To be at the edge of their capabilities, where they don't know if it's going to work or not. When coaches are observing them, too many mistakes, you're going to be on the bench. Where their peers are looking at them, trying to take their job.
Mm-hmm.
And every ball that they touch or don't touch is statted, publicly ranked amongst their peers. Most of us could not even get even close to that level of stress on a day in and day out basis. So they practice vulnerability to be courageous. And for us, we can practice vulnerability every day by feeling emotions and allowing those emotions to be animated, to come forward, to resonate inside of us. And when we're feeling those emotions, to pause with them, to work with them, to be able to put words to them, to communicate them to others, to know how to navigate oneself through them. And that's where we become a great performer from the inside out, is working well with emotions. So it's always available for us every day, but we hold back because we don't want to fall into 1,000 pieces or be a mess. We hold back because it's really hard.
Yeah.
It's really hard to do.
You coached Felix Baumgartner, right?
Yeah.
I mean, a skydive basically from 120,000 feet, is that right?
Just under 130.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, I can't even imagine that.
And just to give context, when you jump on an airliner to go somewhere, they travel at about 30,000.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
stack 5 on top of that.
No.
It's remarkable.
You wonder if he's beyond human. So
no, he's not.
What are some of the things
he's not.
What did he go through mentally, and how did you help him get there? I mean, I just see that as like extreme fear. I probably felt similar, being plucked and put in the middle of the Pacific Ocean on a stand-up paddleboard. I have this irrational fear of sharks, and I've seen them out there on the boat to Catalina. They're out there,
plenty,
big time.
Yeah.
So, what did you talk to Felix about?
So, to set the context, Felix had a dream, a vision, that he would be the person to jump from the highest place on Earth.
Yeah,
and
by a magnitude of like.
A lot.
Yeah.
So imagine 130,000 feet. And the brightest minds in aerospace were not sure. There was 5 very dangerous parts of this mission. And the brightest. Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah. Well, they're all pretty catastrophic. But
yeah.
So this one in particular is if he jumped out and he would tilt his head down to gather speed, he would probably travel the speed of sound, Mach 1. And during that experience, because his arms and legs would have drag, he would be in what's called a transonic moment. Okay. So not fully the speed of sound, but his arms and hands were kind of flapping behind him. And the brightest minds in aerospace were not sure if his arms and legs would stay intact.
Right.
So that's one of the real dangers. And again, there's at least 4 others. So it's 4 years into the project. This was funded by Red Bull, and a team, let's call it 8 people, dedicated nearly full time to this project working. A lot of money, a lot of time was under belt. And then Felix, the fearless Felix, as he was called in his career, called from the airport in LAX. This is all public, so I'm not sharing something.
Yeah.
And he shared our work publicly. Called from the airport crying.
Yeah.
And he says, I'm scared. I'm so sorry. I'm embarrassed. I can't do it.
I would expect nothing less.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And these hardened, crusted, time-tested test pilots and like some of the best aerospace engineers on the planet thought, okay, it's your fitness. Well, let's get some fitness on board. We've watched your heart rate is escalating when you're in the capsule. And it's hard in there.
More crunches.
More crunches, yeah.
More bench
And let's
pressing.
get your cardio right.
Okay.
And you'll work through it. This will be fine.
Yeah.
You are one of the best in the world. We got you.
Easily fixed.
So he's like, that's not really what I thought the solution was going to be.
Yeah.
And so he did it. He went and did all the testing, and and he became more fit.
Mm-hmm.
And he came back, and his experience was still a panic experience inside the spacesuit, inside the capsule.
Sure.
And at 5 minutes, he had to rip the thing off. But he needed to be in it for 5.5 hours.
Right.
So he said, no, I'm serious. I can't do it. And they said, okay, well, hold on. There's this one guy that we know, And so that's where they brought me into the project.
Yeah.
And these time-tested, hardened aerospace, test pilots are no joke. These are people that fly.
Insane. I mean,
fly.
risk reward. I don't know how they do it.
I mean, So they know risk and danger.
Built differently. Yeah.
And so they're looking at me. We're in the desert in California where the training facility was. And all these squeaky black pleather chairs that you would imagine in kind of a unsophisticated but world-class facility, pulled from their desks and kind of semicircle around me. And I'm sitting on this dusted couch, kind of slumped back, and I'm feeling the weight of this moment. And they say, no disrespect to you, Dr. Gervais, but we've been doing this a long time. Mm-hmm. We have never seen somebody come back from this moment. And we are not with you. We do not endorse you being part of this program. We would rather shut it down. We do not want blood on our hands.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Wow.
I thought that's me either.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Like me either.
Well, at least they're upfront about it. I mean, you knew how they...
Very clear. It was kind.
Yeah.
And it was direct. And there was no arrogance about it.
Yeah. You sort of prefer that at that point.
It was great.
Yeah.
And I asked the question, what would you need from him to change, your opinion? And they said, he needs to be in the suit 5.5 hours in the capsule, managing his oxygen and gas exchange. He needs to do that to be able to do this. And
right.
I said, pressurized capsule? He said, yeah, there's one in New Mexico, but we're not. I said, well, what if he could do 2 hours?
Right.
And I'm not trying to sell it, but I'm just trying to see if, is there something here?
Yeah, baby step him into it.
But yeah, and they said, yeah, if he can do it 5.5 hours unpressurized in the spacesuit in a capsule on land, yeah, we'll go to a pressurized capsule. I said, okay. And so I asked Felix, do you want to do the work? It's a question I ask every person or a company I work with. Do you really want to do the work?
Right.
Everybody wants to be their best or the best, whatever their orientation is, but it's special for people that actually do the work.
Yeah.
So do you want to do the work? He said, yeah. I said, do you really, 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 really want to make this happen? Because I am not trying to convince you. There's no motivation. There's nothing. There's
Stakes
no
are high.
tricks. Yeah, there's no tricks here. There's no tricks in mastery, by the way. There's no hacks. There's no 7 steps. There's no secrets to mastery. Okay. And he goes, and he puts his head down and he pauses and he says, I've wanted this most of my life.
Okay.
I really want this.
It's go time.
It's go time. So there's good psychology, and that psychology is called work from extinguishing a fear, not managing the fear. So you can extinguish a fear. And I didn't want to leave any risk up to him managing his fear when he's 4.5 hours up, something goes wrong, and he's a disaster.
Yeah. I also like, I picked up little subtle cues that you started taking little tiny bites out of the problem rather than trying to, all right, let's just jump in with 5 hours and see if you do. If you don't, it's all or nothing thinking.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah, that's
so it's
exactly
like
right.
tiny little.
Yep.
I love that.
And
Okay.
so we're going to ladder your observation back just a bit more is from this theory called systematic desensitization, also known as flooding, also working to extinguish fears. If he could do it in his mind, step one, in a room with me. If he could do it in just a capsule, in just the spacesuit,
Right.
and then the spacesuit, the capsule, you see what we're doing, and then the
Yep.
spacesuit capsule pressurized. Okay. So in his mind first, and that's called, we're just using his imagination,
Like a visualization.
basically.
I can see myself doing it.
So the way that you do that, so you put somebody up to a chest monitor, and this could work for any fear, spiders, snakes, back to your earlier point, or capsules, And so just heart rate monitor, and then he describes 0 to 100, 100 being the most terrified he feels, and a 1 being the least scared, but still, So 1 is like waking up in the morning knowing that I'm going to go do a testing in the spacesuit. A 10 might be pulling off the off ramp to get to the training center. Do you see where I'm going?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Maybe a 30 is walking into the facility. Maybe a 50 is seeing the gloves and the helmet and the spacesuit on the workbench.
Yeah, it's getting real.
Yeah. And then, maybe it's an 80 when I've got the suit on, the gloves are on, but the helmet's not on yet. Okay. So there's a ladder. And then the way that this works is we create at least 10 steps, 10 moments. So if it's 1 out of 100, it could be 100, but I just do 10.
Yep.
And then he doesn't earn the right to go from, in his imagination, from step 1 to step 2, whatever those triggers are, until he keeps his heart rate calm.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
That's it.
Yeah.
So I'm watching the heart rate monitor, and I'm walking him through, okay, Felix, you're walking through, da-da-da, you're doing this now, and da-da-da,
Okay.
use your imagination, da-da, and then you see his heart rate come up, and I say, great, go to work now. And I've already taught him on breathing and self-talk and kind of the basic psychological skills.
Yep.
And he goes to work, and he's working on them, and he gets it down, and I'm watching the heart rate, and when he keeps his eyes closed but raises his hand, and it's actually matching a relaxed heart rate, then we move on.
Very
And so
cool.
that's
Okay.
systematic desensitization.
Yeah, he's training his brain.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. And so that same kind of process could be replicated in
For just about anything.
every scenario
Yeah.
that we're struggling with.
Yeah, and most of us, we just paddle in the ocean as hard as we can and don't do that we grind through things rather than work smartly.
Yeah.
And this work only took 3 hours.
What?
Yeah, 3 hours. The project went on for another 4.5 years, and so I was part of it to
Wait, what?
Yeah,
three
three
hours he was able to.
extinguish his fear.
Okay, well
But we had
he
to
is
test-
special.
No, that could be for you and me. Same thing.
I mean, compared to what he was
We're-
tasked to do.
But we're working on claustrophobia.
Okay. I
Right.
have a bit of that too.
you can find freedom if you wanted to invest.
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, and so
I did an MRI about 10 years ago. That was,
they are
Not
heavy, aren't
comfortable.
they? Dung, 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 and you
Yeah.
just can't move.
yeah.
Have you read the research on one of the classic best meditators ever that was in an MR?
No.
So consider this person to be the best in the world at meditating. Upwards to 40 to 50,000 maybe at this point hours of meditation. Okay. And he was part of a study, and he was fundamentally different in how he showed up in the MR versus everybody else. So one of the interventions is while he's in a deep place, and they just ask him to meditate along with expert meditators and novice expert meditators and just barely trying it out. And the intervention is they would have like a gunshot in the distance,
Okay.
and they would see what their brains would do. What do you think most brains do?
They get distracted and they probably follow the sound.
Yeah.
And
And there'd be alarm, like, oh, is everything okay? Whoa.
Right.
Like, what's happening? There'd
Yeah.
be,
yeah, what was that?
yeah, right. What was that? And kind of like, I need to activate because what if that gunshot gets closer to me?
Right.
Okay. And then he did not have the startle response.
Hmm.
And they asked him afterwards, did you hear the gunshot? He said, I did. I said, well, what did you do? And he said, oh, I had compassion. I was just hoping that everybody was okay.
Ah,
So his training is for loving kindness meditation.
gotcha.
And so in the moment of intensity, we fall to our level of training. We don't rise to occasions. We fall to our level of training. And he fell to his level of compassion because that's
Right.
what he's been training his whole life for.
How does that work with athletes? So, let's go back to my son who runs track and field. He runs the 400 meter and the 4 by 400.
Oh, he's a grinder. Yeah, that's a tough sport.
And he's doing very well. He's on a really good track. He wants to run in a D1 school, and he's pretty decent at it. What advice would you give a kid like that to, train his brain either beforehand or right before the race or even during, when he's gutting it out? What are some of the exercises that he can do?
Well, let's think about the phases that you just walked through. So in all of life, we'll use sport as an example here. We front load our training so we can do the thing well.
Okay.
We prepare for our speech so we can go on stage and eloquently express an idea. Right. We prepare our pitch deck to walk into, whatever and pitch an idea that maybe is going to change some lives. Okay. In sport, we train our bodies and train our craft historically. So on game day, when the lights are on, we can do the thing well. And for most sport organizations, other than the very sophisticated ones, we still don't have systemic mental training.
Right.
Okay, it's just the elite that are ahead of the curve. So in everything we do, we front load the training. So let's just look at front loading mental skills training. Okay, so he's training his foot strike, he's training his arm placement, he's training his cardiovascular fitness.
Yep.
Does he have a pre-performance routine? Is he using mental imagery to see himself be great? Does he have a breathing strategy to downregulate when intensity comes up before he even gets into the blocks? Does he have a way to coach himself? That's called self-talk, to back himself, to build himself, to be great. Those are basic mental skills.
No, yes, no.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
Yeah.
right. And is he doing some sort of meditation for overall increasing of awareness? And those are all very simple skills that he or anybody can go learn. And nobody has a lock on them. But you can go read some pretty simple books, go to a sports psychologist for probably 3 to 6 sessions. You'll know 85% of what you need to know, and which will get you a remarkable delta, a remarkable difference. And I would say start there. And then when he's actually in the race, ideally you don't want him thinking, but if he is thinking, you want him to think about okay, I'll do the latter. Focusing on technical skills is the least potent, but it is better than all the mistakes you can make. Am I okay? How fast is he going next to me?
Yeah.
Oh shit, I'm behind. There's a whole host of called unproductive thoughts.
Right.
On the productive side of the ledger, the least effective is technique. Okay, so we don't really want you to be there. We want you to be speaking to yourself in a way that builds you and backs you, that gives you a sense of swagger and confidence.
Yeah.
Like, let's go.
Yeah.
Bring it.
I'm smirking a little bit because when you said that, I had this image of David Goggins, who's maybe the exception. Do you know who David is?
Of course, yeah.
Who just berates himself and thinks about all the hate that's ever been even imagined, like he's imagined or actually heard.
Yeah, he's using, he's fueling himself with very toxic motivations.
Yeah.
To be have enough anxiety to go further than he thought that he should or that he could. And it's a way.
It works for him.
Maybe not, but it's a way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, well, I don't. David was on the Finding Mastery podcast. It was his 3rd interview he's ever done.
Okay.
And I saw him like 2 or 3 years later at the U.S. Open. And I said, David, he goes, man, you took me to places. He goes, I didn't know what I was saying or doing, but you took, and it was like his cell phone was dropping out. Like it was a disaster of an interview writ large, but he's got a lot of awareness. He really knows what he's doing.
Right.
And he's not looking for happiness.
Right.
He's not looking for a sense of contentment. He's not looking for connection with others.
Right.
Like he's looking for something else to be the hardest MFer alive, in his words.
Yeah, to me, that wouldn't work for me because it's a fuel that doesn't burn clean.
That's right.
And so for me personally, that doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
I would immediately burn out of that fuel, and then I would be in a deficit.
Yeah.
And I would probably be in a tailspin somewhere.
It would get you for a while to work really hard, but the cost of it would be pretty high.
Yeah. Maybe let's round third come home on a lot of people who are watching this, it's age agnostic, right? So some people are coming right out of school and trying to find their purpose, their thing, the thing that they want to do. Some of them are halfway done, like me, and they're hitting the reset button. And they're like, I've been an attorney all my life and miserable. It's paid the bills, but like, it's not making me happy. Help us navigate how to find our purpose. How do we know if we're living our purpose? Talk about that.
It almost feels overwhelming, when you throw around these words like purpose. And so you're going to say?
Does it though? I mean,
for most people,
I feel like I've been writing chapters in my life. Mm-hmm. Like I've had, chapter 1 was just like this.
Oh, cool.
Young, dumb kid who got lucky, found his, the love of his life early, locked her in, and has been with her ever since. Mm. I got lucky to find that right person early. I think it's one of my gifts too. I can see into the future, extrapolate. I can see value far into the distance. I see the diamond in the rough, and I'm definitely that diamond in the rough. But so that was a chapter,
mm-hmm.
And ever since I've been writing these chapters, and my purpose has changed
mm-hmm.
as I've grown, and I'm still in the process of becoming. By the way, like
we all are.
Well, that's good to hear.
Yeah.
So anyway,
I like what you're doing because it's where I go to, which is, let's thin slice this. Let's reduce it down to something I can work with. So if you're going to reduce it down, instead of a life purpose, my purpose for this chapter, it feels like I can kind of get my arms around 10 years, whatever a chapter might be, 7 years. Yeah. And then I would say you could even go much smaller and you say, okay, what is the value of purpose? Well, purpose becomes a North Star.
Right.
So what a purpose does, it helps you to line up your thoughts and words and actions because there's something so compelling that it's forcing its attention on you. And so think of Mandela or Mother Teresa or Jesus or Buddha or like the greats, Dr. King Jr., Malcolm X, whatever you want to insert in here. Their purpose was very, 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 very clear.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so that's the North Star. And before I add to it, the way that you can thin slice the practice of it is you can say, what is my purpose for today? So you wake up in the morning and just think about, and write it down to keep yourself honest. What is my purpose today?
So this is not goals.
This is not a goal.
Yeah, this is not what I want to do or accomplish.
That's right.
This is like
why. It's the why inside of it.
Why do I exist today?
Yeah. Why do I exist? What am I going to do that matters?
Right.
So there's 3 legs to purpose according to research. It has to have personal meaning, meaning nobody can give you purpose. It has to matter to you.
Right.
It's bigger than you. So you're contributing to something that you can't solve on your own. It's bigger than you. Most people's purpose is really themselves, so this is outside or bigger than you. Right. And the third is that there's a future orientation. It cannot be solved in right now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So if you thin slice it down to what's my purpose for today, you could hit all those. What really matters to me today? This is not goals, but those goals are in service of something else. Is it bigger than me? And is there a future orientation? If you practice that on a daily basis for, I don't know, let's say 6 weeks, you'd be tired of that exercise.
Right.
After 3 weeks, you'd probably be really tired still. But it would be preparing you to go, right, well, what's my purpose for this half of a year?
Well, and so it seems like if you do that practice, you're thin slicing it, as you say. I love that term. I'm relating it to when I was an athlete. You get these skills that just become automatic.
Mm-hmm.
Like catching a baseball. At some point, I didn't even think about it, opening the glove. It's just the glove became an extension of my hand, and I did it. And then the other hand would come out, and I would be able to throw.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would guess that this practice that you're talking about.
Right. Those were like technical goals that you would set every day. And then if like, say you were 15 or something, we're having a conversation, what are those in service of? You probably say, I don't know, to win. Well, that's not a purpose.
Right.
Right. So what's winning in service of? And if you were, I don't know, 40, you'd say, oh, well, you know what? I'm trying to put my kids through school, or I want my kids to really flourish. And when I win in business, I'm afforded the opportunity to travel the world to expose them to different spices. Or like when I'm able to do well in business, like part of my purpose is to make sure that there's housing for people. And
right.
that's how so it's, what is it in service of? And at some point, if you keep following that forward and you're like, yeah, that, then you're probably really close to it.
Final words. Let's leave it on a high note. What does great leadership look like? I love that question. It's something I've been wrestling with for the last 3 years. Like, really, what is it? To me, leadership, let's start with a definition of leadership, and then I'll add great onto it. Leadership is, and there's hundreds of definitions. For me, leadership is the inner light shines so brightly that others are naturally attracted to it. Mm-hmm.
So what does great leadership look like? There's an animation inside of them. They are full of spirit and zest and fire, and there's a buoyancy and a groundedness that they're able to hold, and they're awesome to be around. Great leadership is able to hold two things at once. They're able to have clarity of the mission or the purpose at hand. At the same time, they know how to support and challenge others to be their very best, because they know that they can't do it alone. We need each other to be our very best to go after this lofty, big, ambitious purpose that we are sharing together. So they're holding those two. The third dimension of great leaders is that they're helping work in a highly distracted environment in a way that people are able to be fully present and focused, and to create the external conditions to support deep focus, and to create the internal skills to manage that focus well. So I did 3 things. They have a zest about them. They are able to bring the best out of people towards a shared purpose, and they're helping them work from the inside out to live more fully in the present moment. The reason that last one's so important is because, notice I haven't said one thing about strategy, OKRs. I haven't talked about any of that. Is because that is where high performance happens, in the present moment. When people live in the present moment, it's where high performance is expressed. It's where wisdom is revealed. It's where all things that are amazing are experienced. That's the unlock. And so when those 3 things come together, there's a 4th element, which is great leaders know how to generate results. Mm-hmm. And so those are the hooks that I hang my hat on right now for great leaders.
And so is mastery the destination, or is it the pursuit of the mastery? Because just when I feel like I've got this thing down, I realize, oh, no.
Yeah.
Right?
Mastery is the path. And I've asked the question to over 500 people on our podcast, like, what is your definition of mastery? And only one of them has said, oh, I am a master. Just one. And the rest have pointed to the path. So I'll take me out of it and crowdsource what some of the greats on the planet say is like, it's a commitment to a path. And that path is very different than the high performance path.
Right.
Mastery is there's mastery of self and mastery of craft. It's an inner directed, externally expressed path.
Well, it seems like performance can be accomplished in a game, for example. There's going to be a winner and a loser, with the exception of soccer, but that's complicated.
That's right.
But performance on any given Sunday, as they say.
Yeah, right.
Right? The highest performing team, the people who make the least amount of mistakes, whatever.
That's right.
They
maximize more of the opportunities. Like, they're high performers.
Yeah.
At a high level.
Yeah.
And mastery is playing a different game.
Yeah.
It's a different path.
I mean, we were just sitting back, you know, chopping it up, reminiscing about the good old days and all that. You know, tracking my roots, where I came from and where I'm going.